So I'm Helen Hamilton-Shaw, and I am currently the Member Engagement and Strategy Director at LawNet, but will be taking over as Chief Executive in June. So LawNet is a network of progressive law firms located across the UK, who are all committed to delivering excellence in client experience. Indeed, this has been a priority for our network and something that I've led on for over a decade, embedding their commitment to CX into our bespoke ISO quality standard. So I was really excited to be asked to host today's discussion, so thank you, Alex, which brings together experts on that very topic. And we have all contributed chapters to the new book from Globe Law and Business called What Clients Want from Law Firms. So I'm just briefly going to share my screen. So you can all see the QR code, and everybody who is joining us today can benefit from a 15% discount for the book, and you can see the link to the webpage in order to get that on that screen, or you can use the QR code, and we're going to show that slide at the end of the session again too. So I'll just leave that on there for a second while I just introduce my co-panelists. So I'm delighted to be joined by three of the co-authors for the book. So first of all, we have Thomas Santram, who joins us from Toronto in Canada, where he is the Senior Vice President, General Counsel and Corporate Secretary of Cineplex Inc. But prior to joining Cineplex, Thomas was in private practice and represented public and private companies, large financial institutions and all levels of government. Then we have Paul Roberts, who is the CEO and co-founder of My Customer Lens, an AI-powered client listening platform for professional service firms. Before founding My Customer Lens, Paul worked with financial and professional service firms, including MBNA Europe and PwC Australia, helping businesses to create customer insights that improve client acquisition, profitability, and retention. And then Jenifer Swallow advises and coaches tech founders, GCs, and policymakers on legal and strategy matters. She has a leading reputation for her work in governance and ethics, serving on a number of advisory boards, including the Post Office Project. And each speaker will share their own take on what clients really want and how that's shifting. Let me just try and close the screen. There we go. So we're each going to talk about our own take about what we understand of what clients want, how that's shifting, and what we can do about it, both as individual professionals and as firms. And our aim is that everyone will leave with insights from our different perspectives and some practical takeaways. So things you might want to start doing or even stop doing that can make a real difference to client experience and relationships in your firms. Alex Davis from Globe Law and Business, the editor of today's book, is also with us, and she will keep an eye on the Q&A box. So please feel free to share your thoughts or ask us any questions during the session, which if we have time, we will try and answer at the end. So I'm going to kick off and share some thoughts about the chapter that I contributed to the book, which is called The Strategic Necessity of Personalised Client Relationships. And I chose this topic because despite all of the digital transformation, automation, efficiency gains that we're seeing across the sector, in our experience at LawNet, one thing remains really clear, and that's that clients want to be treated as people first, not just as legal problems to be solved. So why do I think personalisation is more than just a nice to have and is actually a real strategic issue for all of your businesses? So clients today are measuring their legal experiences not just against other law firms, but also against top-tier client-centric brands. So if you're in the UK, that might mean brands like John Lewis, Nationwide, or even Timpson, who regularly come top of the Customer Service Institute's performance benchmarking. And they expect not only professional advice, but empathy, transparency, and a real sense that their lawyer gets them. So we've been canvassing law firms' clients for over a decade now, and those themes are things that consistently come out in that research. And that happens through what we call our Excellence Mark program, which helps our firms put client experience front and centre by measuring what matters, learning from real feedback, and making continuous improvements. And that focus becomes more important every year. because clients have increasing expectations, more choice in how they access legal services, and very public ways to share their experiences, good or bad. So getting client experience right isn't just good practice. It's a key part of staying competitive. And harnessing the power of personalised client care helps firms build lasting trust, enhance client satisfaction, and differentiate in a competitive marketplace. There are 5 key things that I just want to leave you with from my chapter. So firstly, and this might be a little bit counterintuitive, but it's that building personalised client relationships actually doesn't start with the client at all. It starts with your culture. Because when your staff feel supported, empowered, and safe, they're more likely to build trust with clients. Empathy and great service can't just be bolted on after you've done everything else. They're at the core of your business, and they need to be role modeled and rewarded and reinforced across the firm. So essentially, this is a leadership issue. We know from years of research that's been done that actually how your people feel at work directly affects how they treat your clients. So getting your culture right and becoming a place people want to be isn't just an HR goal, it impacts your clients too. So it's something you need to be taking really seriously. Secondly, it's the idea that becoming truly client-centric actually isn't easy at all. So at LawNet, we describe it as a journey. So you start off with client service, where you're focused on meeting those immediate needs of your client. Then you might move on to being able to think more broadly about client experience, where you're focusing on different interactions through that journey and what it feels like to be a client of your business. But then actually, when you get to the end of that journey, you're thinking about client centricity, which demands a more fundamental shift in your business. It is about rethinking how the firm operates at every level and ensuring that the client's interests are the driving force behind all decisions and actions that get taken. And if you actually think about that, that is quite a massive shift in how you operate your business. So one of the practical ideas that I know some of our LawNet member firms are using in order to help make this actually happen is to have a symbolic empty chair in key meetings that represents the client. They might even put a badge in front of them on the table that says the client. So it's a really small thing, but it can, if you've got a table full of people all thinking about one particular issue, if you've actually got a stark reminder there that it's the client and the impact on the client that we really need to be thinking about here, that can make that happen. Then thirdly, the other thing I focus on quite a lot in the chapter is about the power of empathy and emotional intelligence. And I know Paul is going to touch on this too, because it's quite a big part of his work. But clients won't remember every detail of the legal process, but they will remember how you made them feel. So that's what's really important. And actually, empathy can be a point of competitive advantage. It reduces anxiety, especially in stressful matters, which quite often legal matters are, builds loyalty. Studies have shown that clients are more likely to recommend a lawyer who shows emotional intelligence rather than one who just demonstrates legal brilliance. And lawyers who understand a client's personal or commercial context, not just that specific problem that they're having in that moment in time, can go on to become strategic advisors, not just service providers. And that's where relationships grow. And Tom, I know you're going to expand on that point quite a lot in your section. Fourthly, is a point about not underestimating the value of investing in soft skills. So you can be the best lawyer in the world, but if that your legal brilliance can quite often be undone by poor communication, and a client could still come away feeling like they've had a bad experience. So follow up, clarity, tone, these are the types of things that shape client perceptions. So it's really important to providing development for your people in those areas as well. And at LawNet, we've seen some really powerful results when firms invest in people development in those areas, especially around communication and relationship building. I know some firms are even doing things like recording client calls and then using them as part of that training process they have with their fee earners. particularly helping people understand how they can do better in relation to communication and relationship building. We have things like people are building crib sheets and structured learning programs, but this is where your culture is critical. Everybody has to feel that they're in a safe place for that to happen, and that they're supported, and that this commitment collectively to looking for continuous improvement in how client experience works is shared across the business, and there's not going to be any sort of negative outcomes for them because it's a learning journey that everyone's on. But we know that works. So over the last decade, our client experience scores across the network have gone from 52% to 76% on average, with the best performing firms getting up to near sort of the top 80s. But that kind of improvement doesn't come from tech upgrades alone, it comes from upskilling your people. So that's really important. Which brings me to the final point in my chapter, which is that technology should enable, not replace, the human element. So yes, clients are increasingly expecting digital convenience. They want faster onboarding. They want real-time updates. They want self-service tools. But technology needs to enhance, not erode, the personal connection that you're building with them. So there's a risk of over-automating and losing that critical human touch. But the firms that will thrive are those that use technology to create space for more meaningful interaction with clients, not instead of it. So personalization doesn't stop after that first contact and, deciding how people want to be communicated with or understanding their needs. It's what happens afterwards. So it's the thoughtful follow-up, the check-in, the sense that the firm really cares. That's what builds lasting loyalty. So essentially, at its heart, personalized client care is about mindset. It's about putting the client at the center of everything, not just at the surface level of service delivery, but deep into the culture, values, and operations of your firm, because that's how personalized relationships will have the focus and support they need to flourish. So, Tom, if I could come to you now as a GC, obviously you are a regular law firm client, so are able to share insights into what clients actually want from the relationship where they have with their legal service provider. So I know your chapter obviously speaks from your perspective as a GC, but I was struck when reading it that actually much of your advice would apply to firms engaging with a broad range of clients, because the focus is very much on how to build lasting positive relationships. So to kick us off, I just wondered if you could share some thinking about how, from your side of the table, what is it that really drives the decision to choose one external lawyer or over another, and what should lawyers understand about that process?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. That's a great lead into my chapter. So in terms of what drives us to choose outside counsel, I think it's important for lawyers to recognize, why would we choose outside counsel? Generally, it comes down to we don't have the workload bandwidth internally to handle a matter. We may not have the time. We may lack the expertise. So, for example, tricky tax issues or securities issues, we're going to go to outside counsel to make sure that we do everything. We're up to date and we're doing everything absolutely the way we should be doing it. I think when it comes down to how external counsel can benefit us, one thing I've always tried to do in private practice, and I appreciate now that I'm in-house, is I don't want our outside counsel to just give us options and let us make the call. I think they have to add value. They have to say, these are your three options. This is the one that I recommend. So put your neck out, make a recommendation, explain to the client why that's the right option. Ultimately, the client's going to make the call. But before, Helen, I'd say before you get to the point where you have a file and you're ready to make a recommendation, my chapter was about how do you build the relationship. So I want to back up a little bit before that first file arrives. The advice I would give to people who want to work for really any client, recognize that it takes time to make connections. You have to build a relationship. You have to earn trust. You use the phrase strategic advisor. I tend to use the phrase trusted advisor. And trust goes a few ways. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute. But What I would say initially is if you invite an in-house counsel, a general counsel, or senior executive in the legal department out for lunch, the lunch is the win. In-house counsel tend to get invited to a lot of events, a lot of lunches, lots of baseball games, hockey games, dinners, all of those types of things. So if you actually do get the lunch, that's the win. The file hopefully will come later. And what you're really trying to do is you're trying to, be genuine, don't be transactional, because what I'm trying to assess is I assume that the legal skills are there. So that's a given. That's table stakes. You can do the job. I'm really looking at, do I want to work with this person? Will I get along with this person? Do I feel this person will work well with the members of my team? And so I would say, just recall, it takes multiple meetings. I think I've read somewhere that it takes up to 9 different engagements with someone, whether it be bumping into them at an event or having coffee or going for lunch, before the relationship really starts to be formed. So take your time. You're on a bit of a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. Once you've built the relationship, Helen, and you're now ready to actually do some work, and you've got the first file, excuse me, and apologies, I'm just getting over a cold. So I think one of the most important things a new lawyer for a business can do is actually make a bit of investment and learn what's important for that business. What are the key priorities? Where does it stand now? What are its long-term goals? And I think you've got to decide, are you looking for a long-term relationship with the client, or are you really just looking for a series of transactional, you get hired every now and then? I would argue that you really want the long-term relationship. So at the start of a relationship, bill accordingly. You might need to spend a little bit of time to learn about the business. That's something that you should really invest in yourself. Recognizing that the more you learn about the business, the more value you can add, and that you can, ultimately your goal is to become a trusted advisor. Your goal is to make in-house counsel look good. And you really want to start to become part of a business team. You want to be seen as an extension of the in-house team. And the way you do that, in part, is if you have a deliverable deadline, you should meet your deadline. Don't leave things till the last minute, because generally, I work with a large number of departments in my company. I share what I get from outside counsel internally and ask for feedback so that we can make a business decision with all internal stakeholders involved. So you have to really make sure you don't let the in-house counsel down. If there's a deadline, you have to meet it. What does
Yeah,
it mean? Yeah,
I was going to say you're putting a lot of trust in somebody, aren't you, when you're asking them to work for you in that way.
you really are, Helen. And it's not just the dollar value or the pound value of the fees that are incurred. You're really guiding the company into certain strategic areas. So there is a lot of trust, and that's why getting to know outside counsel is important. Um, One of the things I would say is one way you become a trusted advisor, Helen, is you do what's best for the client, not what's best for the firm. So if your firm isn't actually the right place for this, if there's someone that you think might be better, you should say, we can do it, but we think you should go across the street and speak with someone else. That builds up a tremendous amount of trust with the client that you're now looking out for me. You're not just looking at your bottom line. And I think one of the last things I would say is everyone's going to be nice to the general counsel. It's important for me that every member of the team at my company be treated with respect. Ultimately, they will tell me the lawyers that they like and the lawyers that they don't like. They tell me who's timely, who's efficient, and who's not. And recognize that the junior lawyer today is going to be the vice president of tomorrow, or the general counsel of next year. So if you start building those relationships now, you really begin to really tighten your relationship with that company as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really all I have to say for now, unless there's any comments or questions.
I think there's some really interesting insights there, I think, for people. And it's always amazes me, no matter what spectrum of this topic you come at, there's so many underlying themes that thread through, don't they? So that your focus on really understanding you as a client and your business and your team, and having that longer term outlook to the relationship is so critical. And it's about understanding clients at a deeper level, which is at the heart of it all. And Paul, I think, from your perspective, that's something that you're really focused on, isn't it? And resonates a lot in the work that you do, and how to build that empathetic approach towards client listening. So, you talk a lot about empathy being central to how we should build those relationships with clients, how we should listen to them. But what does that actually look like in practice? And also, how do you think firms can overcome that internal resistance that I know we sometimes hear in our firms from lawyers who believe they already know what their clients think?
Yeah, that I know my clients is a great line that blocks it. But I think Thomas has actually answered that question for me because um as he said that the other lawyers in his team, they know which lawyers they like, which ones they don't like. They know who's efficient, they know who's on time. These are all things that if you're sitting back in the law firm and you're saying, well, I know my client because I talked to the GC and they would tell me if there's a problem, you don't hear any of that. And I think that for me is gets to the heart of empathy, is that rather than thinking about what do I want to know from the client or about the client, this sort of inside out view, for me, empathy is about going the other side and going outside in. What does the client want me to know? And what can I learn about them to help them better to be that trusted advisor that Thomas talked about? And I think when you go there, you completely rethink how you go about listening to clients. And so client listening has traditionally been, it's a very backward looking exercise. It's been driven by the lawyers that feel it's okay to go and research the client. But very few will put them forward. As you say, there's that internal resistance, and it often comes from Claire Raisin calls it a fear of finding out. This sense of um, I think I'm really good. I'm probably going to offend any other lawyers on the call here. I think I'm really good. Therefore, if the client tells me I'm really good, we've learned nothing new. So there's no upside for me. However, if they say I'm really, really good, but I'm not efficient, or I don't always get back to them, or I annoy someone, then that's a losing situation. And so why bother asking for feedback? Um, and that's not an empathetic view, because that's sort of going, well, I don't want to hear it, and there's nothing in it for me to hear it. The flip side for me is um, being able to sort of say, well, what do clients want us to know? And we think about it in terms of moving from this sort of end-to-end process of we ask clients for research, we ask backwards looking questions, how was it? Invariably, once a matter is finished, you can't do anything about it anyway, so that keeps accountability nice and low, apart from in the model that you talked about at the beginning, Helen, obviously. Uh, and instead, you got to think about it as a flywheel. And I've got the picture in the
Mm.
in the book, where you start by saying, right, well, we need to always be listening. So rather than just going out and researching clients once a year, let's listen at all points of the client journey. So let's ask people how we're getting on. Let's ask their expectations up front. Then let's ask how we're getting on while we can still do something about it. Uh, let's also, to Thomas's point, let's not just talk to the GC. Let's talk to all the people on the client side that we work with and gather all those different views and perspectives, because you can start to see, well, what is it that we do that we're maybe not aware of that they love, so we can keep doing it, as well as maybe the flip side of, is there anything we're doing that's just causing friction we need to know about early. When we talk about always be listening, it's about make it really easy for people to share unsolicited feedback. So
Mm.
when they've got something to tell us, don't put a whole load of multiple choice questions in their way, because just, as consumers, we all hate that. Don't put ratings in their way. Don't say, thanks for that feedback. We've got a survey coming out in 6 months and we'd love it if you could put it in there. Instead, just say, right, what do you want to tell us? Whether it's on email, whether it's a form, just get out of their way, let them tell you. Um, and then so building on from that, there's then the sense of asking open questions. So you've got to be prepared to ask questions you don't know the answers to, in order to hear new things and learn. And so this is where sort of empathy, curiosity comes in. There's another interesting bit about that, because obviously there's a lot of talk about technology and use of AI and all the rest of it. And I actually think that you can use AI within a client listening process to add more empathy. And the reason for that is the technology, not just AI, but various technology that you can now use with client listening, means that you can gather all of this different data from lots and lots of different people across the client, at all the different points on the client journey, and then let technology handle most of the analysis, which bubbles up to the expert straight away. Here's what's coming up. These are the key themes. These are the trends and everything else. And then it allows your experts to spend the time going, right, what does this mean for us? What does it mean for this client? What does it mean for other clients? So you can then start understanding more broadly what your client base is telling you. Because I often, when people push back and say, well, I know my client, my response is usually yes, but you need to be at a point where we know our clients, where collectively we understand not just what clients are telling us, but we can then draw the lines and say, well, because we're seeing this amongst this group of clients, let's go out and ask the same question of other ones, or let's make some new assumptions about where needs are evolving to and all the rest of it. So when you've got the technology in the middle handling all of that data, and all of that sort of day-to-day reporting, your experts then spend their time doing the high value add stuff and the so what bit. And then the final bit is closing the loop. And this is, I think, where you then start to get more engagement, because if you can start saying, right, we're asking these questions of clients, forward looking as well as backward looking, asking about new challenges, priorities, because we want to be that trusted advisor. We're feeding that through the business really quickly. Then let's close the loop and go back to that client, say, thanks very much for sharing that. You know, I hear all the time about clients that refuse to have a key client interview because they've not heard anything back from the one they had 2 years ago from the same firm. That's just basic. But again, it's back to that empathy and thinking, well, what does the client want from this process? Well, they want us to come back and go, thanks for telling us that. Here's what we've done about it. Or we've completely ignored it, but at least we're telling you we've ignored it. Then you've got to go back and say to other clients, here's what we're collectively hearing from people like you, because then they say, oh, well, maybe I'll share a bit more. Maybe I will share about what's going on, what I really like you doing, because you're doing something about it. And then the final piece is close the loop internally and go back internally and say, here's what we've learned. So as a result of these client conversations, we've identified 3 new opportunities. We've seen that something is happening in the technology sector that we didn't know about, that we're now going to produce some thought leadership on. And so it's not just about this experience was bad and we need to fix it. It's about, this is what we've learned that can deliver better client experience. We can deliver to clients faster, better, meet their evolving needs, beat the competition, be more competitive, deliver on a brand promise, whatever it is. And again, that reinforces it. So to your final point there, Helen, about how you get more engagement, for me, it's about, if you get the flywheel going over time, more and more lawyers, partners within the business see the value of listening because the insights are giving them something they don't have. I think at the moment the fear is, well, you're either going to confirm my assumptions or tell me something I don't want to hear, therefore I don't want to put my clients forward. I think if we can reposition it in terms of, this is insights to help you grow your client, grow your business, grow those relationships, here's what we're learning from others, then I think that's how you then start to build engagement. But it's definitely a over time rather than a magic.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. And that power of making the voice of the client meaningful, because there's actual real change coming out of it, or insight, or things are moving forward. I think that's a fantastic point. And also that I really love the point you made about this has to be about the firm understanding and listening, because that ultimately will drive consistency, won't it, and improvement across the firm. And we know from some of the work we do that one of the most common complaints that clients often have is a lack of consistency. And that's one of the biggest challenges that firms have, is how do you make sure that the experience that your client has feels the same, whichever office, whichever team, whichever department, whichever fee earner they engaged with. You can tell that we're dealing with the same firm. So the insights that you get from a comprehensive client listening program like that can really feed into that, can't they?
That's a really good point, because your brand promise sets an expectation for what the experience is going to be, and internally people will look for examples of when you are delivering on that promise and not notice when you're not. But clients the other way around. If you make that promise, they notice when that expectation is not being met. And so you've got this sort of blind spot that internally people aren't noticing what the clients are seeing because you're seeing things that support your expectation.
And listening to clients, it also allows you to pick up on new things that you were talking about, new insights, new challenges, new areas of concern for them, which Jenifer, I think leads us very nicely into your chapter, where you're talking very specifically about a topic that's of increasing focus to the sector and how client expectations are evolving, namely about ESG and how it's no longer just about compliance, but about aligning with maybe your firm's core integrity, their values, and their long-term purpose. Outside of the sector, ESG has become a mainstream business issue. I was really interested in reading your thoughts about, when it comes to legal services, what are clients actually looking for from their law firm in this space?
Yeah, amazing. And also, environmental, social, or better said, societal and governance issues. It's such a volatile climate. Many will have seen what's happening in the US and this huge backlash on what is being classed as wokeism and greenwashing and the anti-climate agenda, all these sorts of things that are coming through. So it's a very volatile context that I think law firms need to know about. But it's also very interesting when we are listening to everybody, we talk about the client, but who actually is the client? It's not, newsflash, the general counsel. The general counsel is obviously a key stakeholder within the client environment, but it's actually the entity, the operation, the organization represented by the board, but really the shareholders in a traditional governance context. So actually, we'll just put a pin in that for the second thing I want to talk to, which is governance. But yes, there's two things I wanted to draw out. There's many things I cover in the chapter, including this point, which actually Paul just referenced, which relates to integrity and the congruence that clients smell a mile off if you are not speaking authentically as a law firm. If you're taking on ideologies and you're trying to propose things and put things forward as if they're the truth, but really they're not who you are as a firm. So I think it's really important for law firms to know exactly what they're there to do and then do it and be congruent with that, and not try to sort of take on any bandwagoning. I think that's very important. But I wanted to highlight two particular things. One is getting with the program on delivery for clients, and the other is getting with the program on governance for clients. And this is all in the context, as I say, of the really volatile geopolitical environment. So this first one around delivery, the first one is actually something that Thomas picked up on, which is it's more important than ever now to be able to advise clients contextually. So it's not just about, here's my expertise, here's the answer to your question. I need you to understand as a client, I need you to understand as a law firm, the context in which I'm operating. So what's happening in my supply chain, what's happening in the industry, what's happening in the competitive environment around the industry. Have we just had a shift in leadership? So there's a new exec or there's a new chair. All the things that technology makes it actually very easy for firms to know about. Like back in the day, you would have to ask somebody for organizational context. Now it's across the press and it can take you 30 seconds to get the update on that context. So then everything you're giving off to that point in relation to advisory is contextual to that. And I think that's very important in relation to the ESG agenda because of the shifts in regulatory. We've got now a deregulatory agenda coming out of certain markets, whilst legislation is still being implemented across particularly the environmental category. You need to stay up to date with that. What are the pressures on firms and advise in the context of that? And this, to me, is more of a consultative approach than I think law firms have taken in the past, bringing adjacencies forward for a firm, for a client. It used to surprise me how few calls I received when, for example, in a fintech I was working in payments, something would happen in the payments industry and no one would call me. Wouldn't be like, hey, Jenifer, I saw that this thing just happened and maybe therefore you might be thinking about X, Y, and Z. There was a sort of lack of this contextual, adjacency-driven advisory and an excuse to have a touch point with your clients and bring value and sell in. So that would be number one. The second thing is about technology and operationalization of advice, if I can put it that way. So what happens is clients receive advice and then they have to go and implement it in various different ways. They have to thread it through policies or procedures or into documents, or they have to translate it into risk and advisory onward. And I actually think there's, particularly from the context of all the topics, so ESG really is a very large bucket of things that otherwise already existed. Whether they're compliance issues, whether it's about responsibility through supply chains or through workforces, whether it's about governance environments, all of those things, once you've received advice on them, you have to go and do something with them. So the ask would be, number one, to be deploying technology for those types of pieces of advice. So if you're using best-in-class technology, you can, for example, code a document so that it will, and this might sound science fiction to you, but it's actually very straightforward, code a document so that it can automate certain elements of its terms. So that then you've already given the client the ability for that thing to automate itself. And actually there are programs and tools that can do that. You may enable documents to be provided in structured data, so that it's much easier for them to talk to different systems. And you can also provide, and this is something that used to be very common when I started out, you can provide teams that can go in as SWAT teams to client environments to actually operationalize the piece of advice. So let's say you've suggested a number of things that need to be done under an environmental category of work, but you know that client has to then go and make that real inside the organization. Offer a team at a correct price point so that they can go in and actually do the work alongside the team internally, get it done, the project's complete, rather than knowing you're going to give that to an overloaded in-house team that then has to find capacity to do it. So I think actually law firms are missing a bit of a step in their resourcing model in relation to more practical support. The second thing is around governance and getting with the program on governance. So it used to be the case in law firm world that the only governance you needed to worry about was anti-money laundering, conflicts management, and handling client money. Those days are gone. Client environments now need you to have your operations and infrastructure governance elements way better established. So that includes, for example, if you are part of a supply chain of a client, which you are, and I know all law firms like to think they're very special, but you're still just part of a supply chain from the client's point of view, you need to have your emissions reporting in place if they have to report. So they have to come to you and ask for emissions information so that they can do their compliance reporting on just the environmental elements and all the reporting requirements they have around the world. If you don't have that in place, that's a problem for them. Same with procurement. I think there's a lot of work that law firms could do to make that procurement cycle more straightforward. But that's one example. I just feel like governance needs to go up the agenda inside law firms way more. It's about having your own house in order on ESG. But it's also around, and this is picking up, Helen, on something that you were mentioning in the intro, it's around ethics trending. So we have now an anti-corruption movement in society. People are getting sick of hearing about scandals that law firms are involved with. Law firms have become a risk on in-house counsel risk matrices. You're actually a risk. So if you look at the Post Office Horizon scandal, all of these other scandals that we see hitting the press, whether a law firm, whether you're aligned with a law firm that's doing the wrong or the right thing in relation to other client activity, that's an exposure from a supply chain point of view for a client. But in addition to that, there are a lot of in-house counsel who are very activated in a relation to integrity and independence. And the movement that is coming through our community in relation to this. The regulators, obviously, particularly in the UK, are paying a lot greater attention to independence and the infrastructure around independence. In-house counsel themselves are having to deploy greater levels of infrastructure to make sure that they can show that they're being independent. Yes, acting in their clients' best interests, but they also have a responsibility to society. And they need to be structuring their own internal operations, reporting lines, insurance policies, all sorts of things in a way that they can demonstrate their own independence. And they want that from their law firms increasingly too. So I think that's important. And the final thing on governance is technology. So I'm a big tech proponent, and I think that law firms should be absolutely getting with the program on deploying technology to make it easy. Please make it easy. That would be the plea for in-house counsel, in particular on the client side. But in relation to using AI, we also have to increase our maturity as a profession in relation to governance around technology. So that's not been something we've had a specialism in before. And there's many teams that are building up multidisciplinary resourcing models to enable them to do that. But as soon as you start deploying AI, you need to also be governing how you deploy AI. And the other great thing around this is something I call coded compliance. So tools eventually will, like the cruise control on your car, have baked into the systems the controls. So the compliance will be within the machine. And we also see technology systems that can actually do AI governance for you. But at the moment, I see this is quite weak in the law firm community. So there would be some download things. Also to say that in the chapter we actually published before the US election, but we were prescient as to the movement around ESG as a category. My sense is ESG as a category will only prevail in relation to the investment space, where ESG is used to describe a category of assets. My sense is that ESG will stop being used as a label. Responsible business is something that's used, or sustainability more broadly now. But we will see, I think, that fragment, and it will become about the individual items, and it will be all about impact, not ideology. So happy to pick up on any of those points.
Well, that's an interesting prediction, Jenifer. And actually, we can see that movement in terms of the lexicon being used within the network. I know several of our firms have recently appointed people like responsible business partners, and there's much more of a focus around the holistic impact of that work on the business and the client, rather than the what, which I suppose is mirrors that move away from ideology to outcomes.
Well, also, and we're also seeing a huge it's crazy what's happening at the moment, even in just the legal industry, around DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion, and how people are sort of pendulum swinging around this space too. So again, it just shows the importance of understanding why you're doing what you're doing, and being very clear about that being what you need to do, and then engaging with your clients on it as needed, rather from starting from some ideological position that you think somebody wants you to say.
There's also really a lot of the stuff you were talking about firms needing to understand the wider context of their clients' businesses and everything that's impacted them. Very similar to what you were talking about, Thomas. And I think in your chapter, Jenifer, you talk about relationships and relevance being the future. And when I'm reflecting on AI and what's coming, and how so many of the transactional process, some of the process-led delivery of legal services that will ultimately be done by AI, the bit that's left is that relationship with clients and the becoming a consultant and developing those deeper insights so you can really add value. So it was interesting that there was a lot of common, everything that we're talking about, we all have that at the core of it, really, didn't we?
Common. And I would say one extra thing to add is the entire reshaping of the industry. So this idea of there being a law firm, and then a tech vendor, and then an alternative legal service provider, and an in-house operation. These things everything is going to be reshaped. Tech vendors are now offering services, and for some clients, their entry point to those vendors will be through the service, not the tech. And then the other way, you've got law firms offering tech products, building tech products, and becoming vendors. So I think all of these sort of historic categories and how we think about everything in a swim lane, I just think that won't be relevant for the future at all.
Interesting. Paul, you're in a technology space. Is there anything you'd add to that?
I would agree with that. I think it's shaping rapidly, and as you say, the categories have kind of been defined in terms of tech providers of different things. But exactly as Jenifer said, it's just a means to an end, and it just starts to be sort of rolled into how you deliver outcomes rather than it being a thing in itself.
And may I just add, for whom are we for whom are we generating outcomes? This is the thing that's very important, obviously, and something I say in the chapter, that it's absolutely critical that law firms have the backs of their general counsel, representatives of clients. It's so fundamental. There's so much pressure on in-house lawyers, pressure to capitulate, pressure to trade their regulatory duties, pressure to give the right answer, and huge volume pressure in terms of how much work they have to do. It's inconceivable, the job, and the job itself is growing, but they aren't the client. The general counsel and the law firm have a common client, which is not either of them. And I do think that then takes your mind somewhere else. I mean, my background is in consumer facing business, particularly in the tech space. And the way that those businesses become successful is by absolutely obsessing about customer need before that need has even precipitated. And that's just not something in the industry that we've had in the past so much, but I can see that now coming through, particularly with the tech providers. And so really it's about that. It's the general counsel's obsessing about the client, and the law firm with the general counsel's obsessing about the client.
And the law firm who are directly dealing with clients. I know we've got a lot of law
True.
on the call today who aren't just serving GC. They're working directly with either individual consumers or businesses. But I think those points hold strong across the three groups, really, don't they? It comes back to that importance of understanding the individual needs of the person you're supporting and working for, and how can you have a broader context about that. Thomas, is there anything else you'd add to that conversation?
Just building on what Paul, yourself, and Jenifer have said, I love the reminder that the company itself is the client, is the ultimate client. And I think that just goes back to my point that, from my perspective, learn the business, learn what's important to the business itself, not necessarily the general counsel, not necessarily particular executives, but if you understand what's core for the business, if you use the holistic approach, which Jenifer was referring to, that will stand external counsel in good stead in terms of providing value and adding value to the business team.
Alex, have we had any questions in from?
We've had a couple of comments, which I think everyone can see, so thank you for those, but no actual questions. And I think that speaks to the fact that you guys have covered your subjects very thoroughly, and so thank you for that. But there is still time. We're here until the end of the hour, so if you do have a burning question, just pop it in the box.
Yeah, I think just to what reflecting on what everybody's said, it's really key that it comes through really clearly that what clients want goes way beyond just sound legal advice. Thomas, I think you said that was an absolute given. It's much more than that, and they're looking for trusted advisors who understand their world, listen with empathy, and can help them navigate the challenges that they're facing with that strategic foresight that maybe your listening gives them, Paul, and integrity that you were talking about, Jenifer. So it's so interconnected. And the firms that are going to thrive, really, when we think about the challenges we're facing from technology and everything else that's going on in this crazy world at the moment, is going to be the ones that can evolve with their clients. But that, 'twas ever thus. The people that survive are the ones that can keep moving and changing and adapting to the environment they're in, aren't they? Because it's not static. Client expectations aren't static. Client experiences aren't static. So we need to think about how we can keep changing. So I thought it might be quite interesting to ask everybody to just maybe sum up with one thing, that one piece of advice that they would suggest that people listening today maybe take away with them and think about what they could change or how they could evolve what they're doing to improve experience for their clients. So Paul, shall I start with you?
Yeah, sure. So mine sort of builds on what Thomas just said, that for me, it's about asking yourself, what do we need to know to be a trusted advisor to the client? So rather than what do I want to know, what do we need to know to be a trusted advisor? And then we talk about looking for signals rather than research. So then start looking for, where can we gather all those breadcrumbs, those bits of data from informal conversations, formal conversations, feedback, research, market research. So if you start thinking about, we need to know all of these things to be a trusted advisor, and that keeps moving. And then how do we keep picking up the little signals from different places? So everyone in the business then is just adding to that pile of signals. I need a better metaphor for that. Information, intelligence that helps you then advise the client. And then to Jenifer's point, you start to see things where you go, we could reach out on that. We could actually now have a conversation with our clients and open up a new line of conversation because of what we're seeing and what we're learning.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thomas?
Yeah, so companies like mine are really fortunate because we're privileged enough that I think we really can hire anyone we want to hire. There are many smart lawyers in Toronto, in Canada, North America. What sets you apart? You may have the technical skills. And I think looking at younger and mid-level lawyers who also have pressures, they have to hit billing quotas and all the rest of it as they learn the trade. So I wouldn't be a good lawyer if I didn't have multiple parts. I have one piece of advice, but it has multiple parts to it. Be genuine, be patient, play the long game, and become the trusted advisor.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And Jenifer?
I actually see Nicola Jones would put a question in there if there were any spare minutes. Do you know, one of the things I find astounding is that there was still reference on this call to delivering on time. To me, that just blows my mind. Like, if somebody needs something on time, then agree a deadline and deliver it. Obviously, if it's not possible because it's a weekend, then obviously that's a conversation and we need to stop doing that. But I still find that amazing that we're having that conversation. For me, it would just be about, please make it easy for clients. Whether it's the CFO, the financial controller, the CEO, the CTO, the general counsel, the DPO, whoever's instructing on a particular matter, they are totally overloaded with work. And they need to have something that's very easy to consume. And they need to have something that tracks very easily through into their organization and how they operationalize what you're asking. They're asking you for something because they need to do something. So help them with the downstream thing, not just the upstream thing. I would say, sorry to add an extra point, but one thing I think law firms are not yet doing well, but really can do well, is to sort their data out, to embrace the knowledge banks that they've got within their firms and make use of that knowledge in a way better and easier to consume way for clients. Whether that's through self-serve that we're seeing a lot more of, but really harnessing data. So I would say do the data work as a firm and then make it super, super easy for your clients.
Okay, brilliant. For me, I guess my point would be really hammering home that bit around client centricity not being easy and not happening by accident. It needs to be intentional, and it takes conscious effort and alignment across the firm, that everybody needs to buy in to this and commit to it. So it needs something at leadership level, and then you need a plan for how you're actually going to make it happen, because nothing happens without a plan. So my takeaway from this would be go away and get together with your teams and try and develop a 90-day plan or something for, identify 3 things that you're going to do immediately. They're gonna make a difference. So have somebody who's responsible for representing the client in a meeting. It's their job to speak up if they think something's happening that's not to their benefit. Set up a client development cross-functional, cross-department team, get individuals from different teams, bring them together and let them talk about client experience in their areas of the business, and brainstorm how you can improve that. But breaking it down collectively, I think is really important. But you've got to make it happen, and then you need to track the impact of the changes that you're making and then review. Don't just leave it. It's got to be an intentional piece of work that you're doing to improve the business and the experience for clients. We've had a question now, and interestingly, Thomas, when you were talking, I wrote down learning and development for mid-level lawyers, and that is the question that Nicola has asked us. So she's asked, what are the skills we need to nurture in the law firm of the future? I would like to take that one. Is there something we think?
I'll take maybe one point and then pass it on. Hi, Nicola. Great question. Multidisciplinary. So obviously there's piece around how to do consultative advisory work well, how to stay dynamic, how to think from first principles. There's all sorts of things around the edges. But in terms of resourcing a team that's going to deliver legal work under the banner of law firm or whatever you're going to replace that title with, we need to have multidisciplinary teams. We have to have people who understand how data works. We have to have people who understand the tech stack. We have to have those people integrating with legal specialists. Behavioral science is huge. So it's going to take a village to morph to what clients need and keep up with what clients need. Baton pass to someone else.
Thomas, do you want to give me your
Yeah,
perspective?
no, I think it's interesting. I hire, and I think most general counsel are like this. We hire lawyers, we don't hire firms. The pedigree of a firm, I think, is important because it speaks to what Jenifer just said, which is it's nice if you need tax advice or securities advice or corporate advice or litigation advice for there to be that village to take care of the needs of the company. And it builds on what Paul said. Everyone at the firm really has to understand that client. It can't just be the lawyer who developed the relationship or who now owns the relationship. And I think the last thing I'm going to say, going to your point, Jenifer, about deadlines, I generally ask, when can you get it done by, unless I have a very tight deadline myself. But I try to move things along in an orderly manner. If I ask you when you can get it done by, you've got to have it done by that date. That's your deadline, and that's your commitment to me. And you'd be surprised that that doesn't happen sometimes in some of the biggest firms globally, which is disappointing, surprising and disappointing. But I'm responsible to a business team. And when I tell them that I'm going to have an answer by such and such a date, I really need the answer by that date.
When we're thinking about skills development, I think I would also counsel not to ignore the impact of what we might think of as being obvious soft skills, communication skills, having difficult conversations with people. So at LawNet, we have quite an active early career group, and we provide a lot of learning and development training for people in that group. And it's things like that they find hugely valuable. People come out of law school and they've got some great technical or understanding of the law, but nobody has actually taught them how to engage with clients, how to build relationships, how to have those conversations. So, going right back to first principles, really important to make sure that your teams are able to manage those relationships confidently and in a positive way. So don't forget communication skills, I would say.
Or reading a set of accounts. Everyone should be able to read a set of accounts. Spreadsheet people, spreadsheets.
Fantastic. Okay. We had somebody said they can't see the comments. We've had a few comments in, people talking about interestingly, someone talking about chemistry being critical to reach that pinnacle of partnering. Clients want firms who can relate to them, understand their business goals, and share their core values. And also, I guess, the importance of making sure that the lawyer and the client are well matched. If you've got a whole team, find the right person in that team to manage that client relationship. That can be really powerful, can't it? Also, the importance of using, if you don't have a client listening program, how effective is your appraisal and development program for fee earners? Are you missing a big voice in there about the impact of the client? That's a really interesting observation. Thank you, Oliver, for that one. Oh, we've had another question, one final question we've probably got time for. What would be the most useful way to incorporate AI into a law firm from a client's perspective? Ooh.
Great question. Depends on the client would be my answer to that question.
Thomas, from your perspective as a client of law firms, how would AI help you?
Oh, you know what? I'm actually going to just defer to Paul on that one. I'm still trying to figure out AI and what it can do. I think it's either age or just me being a Luddite, but I'm not too sure what to make of it yet.
It's neither one, Thomas. It's neither one.
Not at all.
My 30-second answer to that is probably enable human greatness, in terms of use it to help your experts deliver more value. Don't use it to take away from the inherent humanness of it all. It can be efficient. It can help you get to first drafts and all the rest of it. But I think ultimately, and someone sort of put a comment there about start at the end, think about what's the outcome, what makes you different, to Thomas's point, where are you going to add value, and then let AI help you get there faster.
May I add a point to what Paul said is there's lots of firms looking at sort of general purpose AI, and I get why, and of course that will be table stakes very soon. For me, the value add is understanding particular client bases and providing them tools that means they don't have to ask you for advice on that thing. And I appreciate that that's cannibalizing a revenue stream for you, but you will definitely get more instructions if you do that. So whether it's, real estate, lease reviews, you have a tool that provides that on a self-serve basis. So you don't have an associate doing that for you anymore. And then you're providing services off the back of that, whatever the particular use case is for your clients that they need, or if it's you're typically defending them in situations where they have failed to meet compliance requirements, do something upstream that helps them themselves avoid having to get into that situation in the first place. So just spin the idea on the head and have a think about how you can use AI for that.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. So it is 4 o'clock, and so I think it's probably time to say goodbye. Thank you very much to Tom, Paul, and Jenifer for a great discussion. Thank you to Alex for organising. I know a recording of the session is going to be available afterwards, isn't it, Alex? So, and Alex will find a way of sharing that with everybody.
Yep, we'll send the recording out to everyone after the session. And did you want to share the code against
Slide. There we
the
go.
book, which I have here?
Yes.
There you go. People want to grab the QR code or the link one last time so that they can access the discount. It's a really great book. I know we're all in it, but it's so many different perspectives, I think, from the client's point of view, and so there's lots of really interesting insights in there about how we can all tackle that never-ending challenge of trying to decipher what clients want. Okay, so thank you very much and goodbye.